Yeah, we are live. Just one second.
MC, Frank, Frank.
We are live now.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
I'm very delighted to be here and to have this wonderful opportunity to be in your midst. Your presence reveal that you care for human rights and for democracy, and that make my heart very glad. So we are here in the National Press Conference to discuss about issue that is very important to us. As Dr. King used to say, it will affect one directly, affect all of us indirectly. So what happened to other people in the world, even though it seems to be far from the United States, it does affect also the United States indirectly. So with no further ado, I would like to invite to the podium Dr. Blend Lawrence. He's a minister. He's been a minister for over 60 years. He worked with Dr. King, but I will give him the opportunity to talk about himself. And I'm giving him 2 minutes, but you know, when you give 2 minutes to a Baptist preacher, you know, when they are filled with the Holy Ghost, they may go over a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Henrietta
I
H.
appreciate the comment, and there's a lot of truth in that. I hope you can hear me clearly. If I need to go up an octave or so, I'm only too happy to do so. I want to say I welcome the opportunity this afternoon to discuss a very vital subject, and that's human rights. And we all know not enough is being done in the area of human rights. I've had over just about 60 years, a little more in civil rights. And while I'm very proud of that marking and what it represents in my colleagues and associates who participated in grassroots opportunities for growth and legislation passed, particularly in 1964. One of the things that we failed to do, and it's indicative of what's happened in the leadership in Africa, is we passed legislation for civil rights, but we did little or nothing when it came to economic rights. And what we're witnessing today is that backlash where we didn't build our ties and relationships to those that would give us the opportunities to expand our cultural, local in the United States, as well as throughout Africa. One of the primary problems that we've dealt with in a nation such as the continent of Africa, where you have 55 different countries, some bigger than others, and obviously some more powerful than others, is they fail to deal with the root cause of the infringement. That's not just ownership, having to deal with tribalism at the level that you have to understand to make it work properly for all of the inhabitants of any given country. To exclude other members of your community is wrong. It works for nobody, and it works to the detriment of the growth of a nation. We have to consider the ideology of what it represents for the whole. And until Africa reaches the stage of where it becomes a united African state, they're going to continue to experience this. I've watched the debates here just recently and yesterday evening for the Democratic Party. Disappointingly, they continue to argue amongst themselves. While it's not a matter of what party is in charge, it's what they do when they have the charge, that responsibility to go with it. There's no real war on poverty in America or anywhere in the world. and it's at the expense of a better society, the wholeness of a nation, and what we aspire to be. If you look behind me to my right and to your left, you see this wonderful flag behind us. That's the United States of America. Well, America has all of its aspirations tied into this flag, a history that surrounds the growth and development of this nation. Well, that's what Africans have to see in each of the 55 nations, that they matter, that their democracy is in their constitutions. However, unfortunately, infringement upon Africa by those who would be greedy or take advantage of those who have not the sophistication and some of the knowledge to achieve higher goals affects them directly because of the disenfranchisement within themselves. It's not just others coming in, white folks or anyone else trying to take and steal everything from Africa. Africans, just like Black Americans, have a responsibility to their respective countries to deal with the concepts that make a difference, that encourage growth and a stronger foundation for any nation. We fall short of the mark because we have not been what? We have not led by education and appropriate financing and the teachings that have to be done to change the minds of its leadership. I mentioned a moment ago that tribalism is a major issue. And until that's dealt with, they will continue to see the wars amongst themselves. And we all know what happened in Rwanda. We all know how that turned out. And we're glad to see that there's a foundation now in place that will give growth and opportunity to the Rwandan people. What about the other nations that are suffering? Africa has a 1.3 billion population, the second largest population in the world behind China. China is making inroads in dealing with their people successfully. They recently have become part and parcel to dealing directly with the African nations independently and hopefully some collectively. They're building roads throughout Africa to the interior. That's a big plus. That means wherever those roads lead, there will be other commerce to encourage local development. There are loans being made, as we know, which are the microloans. That's a good thing. But if you don't know where your greatest potential is for growth, you're almost funneling things in the dark. We need to be more focused in dealing with the needs of Africa. The United States itself has recently taken another position over the last 10 years and disinvestment in Africa. The last figures I saw were $50 billion, which are down from close to $100 billion some 10 years ago. That's the wrong way to go. And being able to do what? Provide genuine opportunity to eliminate as much disease, if at all possible, create as many job opportunities, and secure the wealth of the people who need the proper direction. We fall short of the mark by virtue of very foolish things. Most of us don't understand what democracy means. Democracy is successful only when you have capitalism. If you exclude capitalism, you're more than likely to have a failing economy. Capitalism cannot work under Marxism, socialism, communism, any of those isms that affect any culture. It doesn't survive, but it does work under a democracy. It encourages free trade. It encourages the opportunity for potential growth. It's inclusive of the people who live in those particular countries. Only when we do that. And when you have a constitution that doesn't deal with the issue of democracy, in most of those constitutions, you'll find, if you take the time to research it, that it does not include the word, or they don't include the words democracy. They may identify themselves as the Democratic Republic of A, B, C, or D, but take a close look at the Constitution. They don't talk about a democratic process, which means, well, what? We're facing the realities of another potential dictatorship. Dictatorships are there because we feed the wrong food to them, the wrong information. Term limits would restrict that. So if we had term limits, they couldn't be in office 40, 50, 60 years. You would see a market change. Even in the United States, we have senators and congressmen and women in the Congress of the United States that have been there for 30, 40, 50 years. That's entirely too long. Absolutely too long. But if there were term limits, you don't have that process. You have an opportunity to do other things in relationship to it. It's always at the expense of the poor. We continue to create poverty. Poverty is not something that's natural. It's an abnormal way of living, existing. Poverty is created by humans. And we look at the wars and the pestilence and the continued conflicts worldwide. That comes because humans have one objective in mind, the human species. It saddens me, but I see it typically all over the globe. Humans killing humans. Humans wanting to genocide other humans. There's a big question. Why are we so bent on the destruction of other humans? Destroying the human race. No other animal or species on this planet wants to eliminate itself. None. All of them want to enjoy whatever benefits are available by and from the Creator. But the human species itself works overtime in attempting to destroy other humans worldwide. Why? There's no evidence of someone else. Remember in my closing statement that a flag of a nation is that nation's ability to be free, its desires, its aspirations for a different tomorrow, where you can have decent housing, clean water, and all the things that make us physically and psychologically healthy. Without those things, we repeat the mistakes of the past. So let's hope that this conference and others in the future will be a beginning point where we look at ourselves and not blame others for what we're not doing. I thank you so much for your appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. If there's any questions, the floor is open. You can answer a question. There is a microphone over there, so you can go there and ask him directly a question and he will answer. As we are going through the program, it is important for us to understand that democracy is something that is very important. Human right is something that is very important. So we need to understand and comprehend what is at stake. And I think the best way for us to comprehend what's going on in the world is to ask questions. So if there is any question, then there's opportunity to ask question to Dr. Lawrence. So, if there's no question for the time being, then we will go to the next speaker. I have the opportunity to introduce right now Mr. Adote Akwe. He will be talking to us concerning human rights, especially in Rwanda. The truth is that the fact that we are human, we have rights. And those rights are actually God-given. It's not something that we need to argue about. It's something that we are born with. We're supposed to be free because we are human. And all of us, we are endowed to have the pursuit of happiness, liberty, and of course, life. So I will call Mr. Adote Akwe to come and discuss with us concerning human rights in Rwanda and other places in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'd like to welcome and thank my colleagues on the panel, and also like to thank Henrietta and her organization for pulling together this press conference. But first, I would like to say something to the family of Kizito Mihigo, and then talk a little bit about the situation of human rights in Rwanda. Amnesty is shocked and deeply saddened by the news of Kizito Mihigo's death. The Rwandan authorities have stated that he committed suicide. They must immediately launch an independent, impartial, and thorough investigation to determine the cause of death, including whether it was natural or accidental, or a case of suicide or homicide. There must be no whitewash. The investigation should establish all the facts, including the possible involvement of others, and whether prison practices and conditions caused or contributed to Kizito Mihigo's death. A little bit of background about the case. On February 14th, the Rwandan Investigation Bureau confirmed that Kizito Mihigo had been arrested in Nyaruguru district, close to the border with Burundi. He was accused of attempting to illegally cross into Burundi, joining, quote, terrorist groups, and because of corruption, as well as breaching the terms of his release from prison in 2018. Kizito Mihigo had previously been close to the ruling Rwandan Patriotic Front, but in April 2014, he was arrested after releasing a gospel song in which he prayed for victims of the genocide and victims of other violence. In February 2015, he was found guilty of plotting against the government, forming a criminal group, and conspiracy to commit an assassination, and was sentenced to 10 years in jail. In 2018, he was released from prison by presidential pardon, along with opposition politician Victoire Ingabire, on condition that they report to the local prosecutor once a month and to seek authorization before traveling abroad. Unfortunately, Kizito is not the only name that has been in the international press recently. Just later in 2019, we had the case of Jackie Umuhoza, the daughter of a pastor who is in exile, who was arrested on November 29th and remains in detention with no explanation given for her detention. Just 2 years ago, we were all involved and concerned about the case of Diane Rwigara, who was a subject of a deliberate and quite overt attack by the ruling party, by the party's loyalists, and by the Rwandan judicial system. All of these are unfortunately very, very alarming indicators of the state of the rule of law and human rights in Rwanda. Although Rwanda is seen as a successful in developmental terms, the price of development has been the forced subordination of the population so that no criticism of the state be tolerated. This has resulted in compromised elections, with opposition parties largely suppressed, opposition candidates imprisoned or driven out of the country or assassinated. It has resulted as well in the suppression of freedom of the press, suppression of independent human rights organizations. In short, it bears marks of a repressive or autocratic state under the guise of democracy. These reports are echoed by the United States Department of State. In 2018, the Department of State Human Rights report on Rwanda said that Rwanda is a constitutional republic dominated by a strong presidency. Human rights issues included reports of unlawful or arbitrary killings by state security forces, forced disappearances by state security forces, torture by state security forces, including asphyxiation, electric shocks, mock executions, arbitrary detention, political prisoners, arbitrary unlawful interference with privacy, threats and violence against journalism and journalists, peace and crackdowns on freedom of assembly, association. This is not the resume of a successful democracy. These reports are echoed by reports from my organization, Amnesty International, as well as by other organizations such as Human Rights Watch. There are a number of reasons why the death of Mr. Mihigo needs to be investigated. Because there are other people who have been disappeared and who have been killed. and there have not been any answers or explanations of what happened to them. This is why in our recommendations to the government of Rwanda and to the United States, we start our first by calling on the government of Rwanda to establish an independent judicial investigative mechanism into unresolved killings and disappearances, including the murders of Andre Kagwa Rusereka, Jean-Leonard Rugambaga, Jean Damascene Habarugoria, Illumine Iragina, and Jean Damascene Munyasheka, and Boniface Twagirimana. These individuals are unfortunately just emblematic of the repression that is going on in Rwanda. But we cannot allow people to be disappeared and to be forgotten. We also call upon the United States to review its security assistance to Rwanda and to ensure that any assistance that is given is subject to Leahy law vetting and restrictions, which prevent U.S. assistance to military units and security force units that are linked to the commission of grave human rights abuses. But more importantly, we call upon the government to increase funding for programs focused on rebuilding respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the independence of the judiciary. Disengagement is not an option. The Rwandan people deserve the support of the United States and the international community. The Rwandan people deserve and have their rights, as was pointed out earlier. And the government of President Paul Kagame must be held accountable. It must be called upon to prevent restrictions on or harassment of opposition politicians, their supporters, journalists, and human rights defenders. We must make sure that this tragic death of Mr. Mihigo is not forgotten, it is not pushed to the back, and that people who try to express solidarity with victims of genocide or even critique or question government policies do not suddenly become disappeared. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As you said, it is important to understand that everybody is entitled to life. And life should be sacred, not only in the United States or in Europe, but it should be sacred all over the world. African lives has value as much as an American life or European lives. And it is important for us to point out those wrongs in our respective country. That is why I will call the next speaker, Mr. Gilbert Mwenedada. He will come, he's from Rwanda also, and he's a genocide survivor. I will give him also 2 minutes so he can introduce himself, and then he will talk to us about human rights in this country.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank you so much for your presence in this room. Your presence is an encouragement to the Rwandan people. We are so glad to see you coming and be with us at this time that is really not easy for many people in Rwanda, because we are in that time for mourning the big loss of a person like Kizito Mihigo, who was really a symbol for peace for the whole nation. So it's really a big loss, and having people like you coming along, be with us, we are really so grateful for it. First of all, I want to thank the speakers who came before me for explaining very well the main reason why we're here, and for Adotei as well as his organization, Amnesty International, because of everything they've been doing, the fight they do for human rights. Their contribution is known and recognized across the world. And we thank you for coming here to be with us and also to honor the life of our beloved Kizito Mihigo. So they say, my name is Gilbert Nyenedata. I'm a Rwandan, and I'm at this time here in America. And it's like the reason why I came from my country to this country here in America, of course, it's related to the reason why people like Kizito Mihigo can lose their lives. So it's not just me. There are many other Rwandans who should have been here, but who've not been to come, either because they are far away from Washington, DC, or only because they are scared for their images to be in this room. That makes me very sad to see that Rwandans, miles away from home, cannot even have the courage to come. The truth is, they love Kizito Mihigo, but they know the cost of being present here, especially when they know that the camera can be there. So that really should give you a message. Look at this room. The Rwandans know, but you call them and say, could you please come and be with us? It's like, just tell me everything you need, but I cannot come because of security reasons. Even myself, just before I get started, I'm here in America, but not yet safe. It makes me so sad to notice that. You are here in America, but you cannot even disclose your physical address. In America, in a country that is known for freedom, in a country that is known for security, but it's for a reason. We have a government that has been crossing the borders to go out of country to take lives of people. So you can guess why Kizito Mihigo was trying to go out. He failed, or maybe if he was really doing it, but it's very unfortunate. So right now, standing here as a Rwandan, I'm so proud for all the achievements my country has been able to make. And I'm grateful for the good things the current regime has done for my country. No, even though I'm here today, I don't mean that they've done everything wrong. No, they have done some good things. Economic development, as people say, along with, of course, the development partners, the United States of America being the biggest one, and we are so grateful for that. However, when it comes to human rights, the government of President Kagame, we notice several cases of extrajudicial killings and deaths in custody. Kizito Mihigo being a good example for that, but the list is very long. For the last 20 years, the US government and human rights organizations, they described poor conditions of human rights in Rwanda, and they noted disappearances of political dissidents, arbitrary arrests, and of course, and acts of violences, torture, and murders committed by the police. The lack of freedom in Rwanda is not something new. According to The Economist, in 2008, they said, Kagame allows less political space and press freedom at home than Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. That was 2008. And today we are here to talk about the deterioration. So the worsening of human rights conditions. So now, the problem is that it's like anyone who may look like a political threat to the regime is dealt with ruthlessly. So now, more than 10 years later, I mean, starting even from the 2008, what do we notice? President Kagame himself said that we are going to raise the cost of anybody who wants to destabilize our country. Let me say this, the cost was already very high. Raising, it was like, people were trying to say, how can they raise that cost, which is already very high? So that was a warning, and allow me just to see a small video to see like, which would be a good explanation of what I'm saying. So, because that one
Front.
actually,
Just 1 second.
we are trying to see how it can come to the screen. If it doesn't work, maybe we can see if we can do it later. Unless we get the appropriate technical assistance. We can see it here, but we just wanted to see if it can be on this, the bigger screen. Yeah. I think we can see how we can go through it later. You can try to figure out how later we can be able to see it. So again, the video is about, it's like it was a statement within the president's speech whereby he was talking about raising the cost for anyone trying to destabilize the national security. So I think we are going to get the technical assistance so that we may be able to see the video.
And then you do things behind our backs and cause us problems. We will put you where we belong. There's no question about it.
You actually give it to the MC.
People who have
MC,
been involved
the guy in the corner, the guy in the corner.
the tragedy of genocide and have continued to play that politics and ideology, and they have gone to prison, then they have come out of prison, and for it we have forgiven them, and then they start playing those games again. We will put you where you belong. And those ones who make noises about it, we will see what they will do.
Pointed
Yes, I will tell you those who play games with this nonsense and want to put us back where we have been and have left behind us. Let me leave it at that point.
Hi, I'm Rex Moore with the Motley Fool, and I've been to a very crowded CES.
That's a commercial.
You've spoken a lot about democracy, and I would
It's
just,
okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Are we done? It was probably longer than that one, but
Yes.
we can stop from there. It probably gives the whole message. So, and now it's the clarification I can provide on this one is that any criticism equals destabilizing national security. So don't think that it is about armed groups or anything else, but a simple speech may equal to destabilizing the national security, and the cost may be what happened to Kizito Mihigo. So it is unfortunate that at this time we can see the regime using memories of the genocide to silence opposition and the media. Ironically, by silencing any dissident voice, the government is pretending to maintain harmony, ethnic harmony. Sometimes ago, under the umbrella of the genocide ideology, we have had laws that was, I can say, to legally silence the opposition, because it's like some kind of speech was equal to genocide ideology. So opponents have been accused of divisionism and inciting, ethnic hatred. In 2010, Rwanda was among 10 lowest ranked countries in the world when it comes to press freedom. Reporters Without Borders stated that Rwanda, Yemen, and Syria have joined Burma and North Korea as the most impressive countries. So this drop was caused by suspending, I can say, the main independent press media, like Umuseso and Umufugisi, and the murdering of the deputy chief editor of an independent newspaper, as mentioned by Adotei. His name was Rugambage Leonard. So that one was killed during that time. So because of that, that's why we dropped and have been among those 10, lowest ranked countries when it comes to the freedom of the press. At this time, I can say the ranking is no longer the same. At this time, it looks better, but guess why? There is nothing at this point to close. Everything to be closed have been closed, And up to now, the self-censorship is very high. The media is saying basically almost nothing just for their safety. So that's the reason why it's like, the journalists have already learned a lesson, and the outcome is, of course, the lack of information to the people, and you try to report what you think will be pleasing the government. Quick to 2017, the government of Rwanda decided to withdraw the right of individuals and organizations to file appeals before the African Court on Human and People's Rights. So what does that mean? It was just cutting off access for those who are denied justice by domestic courts. Without justice within the domestic courts, you are not even allowed to go to the African, Human and People's Rights Court, just to bring in your case. 2017, again, what happened? President Kagame was re-elected for the third term in office. He has been in power for the last 26 years, and almost the last 26 years, even though for the first 6 years he was the vice president, but technically he was, the one making the decisions. So, and he's allowed to be in power for the next 14 years. So you can imagine what it means with the current situation. So now, what is the outcome of all of this? In 2019, according to our president, actually it was also part of the video, democracy and human rights are nonsense and luxuries that probably Rwandan people cannot afford. Actually, that was in a couple of interviews. Nonsense, those democracy and human rights. So, and of course people suffer and you can lose lives like the life of Kizito Mihigo. So, now, briefly, what is the current situation for the human rights and what are the main problems we are facing as Rwandans? There is existence of several political prisoners. There is lack of freedom of the press. And again, according to Reporters Without Borders, in 2019 Press Freedom Index, self-censorship is commonplace. Journalists being threatened, harassed, and arrested for criticizing the government. They say that the government of Rwanda has never accepted that the press should be granted genuine freedom. So there is that kind of lack of any kind of freedom. No freedom of assembly, no freedom of religion, with more than 7,000 churches closed 2018. More than 7,000 churches. Actually, when I was reading with in Christian Today, they said 8,000 churches. But I've always believed it's more than 7,000 churches, so which means really a very high number. Across the nation, different districts of the country, it's like within Kigali it was several hundreds, but nationwide, more than 7,000 churches closed. And people keep quiet as if nothing happened. They know the cost is very high, the cost of speaking, the cost of complaining, it would be destabilizing national security. So it's there is a very long list of critics of the Rwandan government, dead or missing. So finally, when it comes to Kizito Mihigo, thank you, Adotei, for saying it very well. Kizito Mihigo survived that genocide at the age of 13. We know him personally. I've been with him several times. Actually, he came to, the first time I met with him, I was in my work with, back in my country, I've been working with the US government. I was in charge of peace building where I've been working of justice, peace building, and conflict management. That's why the first time I met Kizito Mihigo, it was just part of my work, but we became friends. So it's like I've just known him as someone doing outreach to prisons, bringing prisoners together, giving them the message. You know, it's like trying to do everything I believed was very important for the Rwandan people. He has been doing that to schools, going out to schools. I've seen him organizing concerts to different churches. And I know, of course, again, he helped to compose the national anthem. And I cannot really finish to talk about the long list of things he has been doing, but I can say just his actions speak much louder than my words. And what I can say right now is that Kizito Mihigo has given much to his country, to Rwanda, and we owe him respect for his selfless contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. As we can see, all over the world, especially in Africa, some people are truly suffering. They're suffering because, as anybody in the world, they aspire for liberty, for life, and of course, the pursuit of happiness. And like I said, that's a human right. It's normal for human beings to aspire to great things. It's normal for human beings to desire to be free. It's normal for all of us to be free, and it shouldn't be an exception in Africa. So I'm very delighted to hear all those great speakers, because they're pointing out something. Even though we are afraid, and even though the menace is there, it is important for us to speak. Because if we do not speak, what will happen is that the people who are doing wrong to us, people who are hurting us, will continue to hurt us. So we need to speak. We need to point out what those people are doing to us as a people. I will call the fourth speaker. Is he here or?
The videos.
Okay. So we will now continue to a set of videos that we will be watching.
I have a question.
Yes.
Approximately 5 years ago, a little further back than that, a friend of mine, Charles Taku, who was the lead counsel for the United Nations, tried those who committed the acts of genocide in Rwanda. It took him 10 years to get them in court, the international court. They were found guilty, and they were each given 50 years. Because of their age, they will stay in prison. Now, that should be an indication for anybody that anything is possible. So if they're repeating the same things of the past, you have a history now of having been able to prosecute the wrongdoer. And you must stay in contact with these people that provide that kind of leadership. His name is Charles Taku, very personal friend of mine. Just use my name, guaranteed. He's at The Hague right now. That's where he's stationed. He was uplifted to another position. Very personable, and that's his specialty. Bringing those in leadership that genocide their people to trial. And he was extremely successful. So your history depicts that there is hope, that you have something to measure the future on. There's an opportunity to meet with him when he's in town next time. Our little leader back here who takes care of so many things, Miss Mary Uweri, very special woman. She's shy, she doesn't say very much, but she's smart as heck. Well, I want to make sure that you have this opportunity to meet with him the next time he's in town. And he lives in Maryland. That's where his permanent residence is. But he's lives family, and he lives internationally at The Hague. And he's been doing this for the last 30 years. You'll be real proud that you've had a chance to talk with him. He can give you clearer direction on that. If that's good with you, we will make sure that becomes a reality. One other thing, you have 8,000 churches. I'm very familiar with that. There's where your power generally lies. If they work collectively together towards a common end. Because it's not a matter of race in Rwanda, no more than it is a race in China. People are of a particular hue. So then there's no distinctions of white, black, and those foolishness that become divisitory. It's about economics and tribalism and being able to make sufficient contributions to the future growth of your people. And I think as we set this up, I think you'll be very happy that you're taking the opportunity to do that. And we'll get together in detail on it.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna stop your live. Stop it. Okay.
I can't thank each and everybody who is here today. In particular, the panelists for supporting us. But I want to give just a small description of who Kizito is vis-a-vis the country, Rwanda, that where I come from. I would describe Kizito just in poetry and his contribution to the nation. The Rwanda's national anthem is called Rwanda Nziza, which means beautiful Rwanda. That was the melody which we have just heard was composed by this young man. While he is in jail, after competing with other people who were in jail, that at that time he had not gone into jail. There is another video which actually, if we get time, we are going to share. It's called the Numa. That is the dove. And his philosophy was like, the dove has got two feathers. One carries blood. Blood is life. The other one carries water, which is life. The head of the dove has got a rainbow, which is forgiveness. Remember the time of Noah. We are talking of a person who was full and rich on reconciliation, preaching forgiveness, but above all, youth, where majority of Rwandese youth just really hoped that Kizito would be, is just going to be a model. Just like all of us who are here. Kizito started from France. After finishing, he had to go back and serve his country. All of us remained here, we didn't go. But at age 38, see how much he had done had God given him a chance to reach 70. So I will just describe that in relation to youth distraction and destruction of hope. To me, actually, I say Kizito's situation is like an assault to democracy. It's an assault to poetry, because Kizito had much of Rwanda. Very many songs, patriot songs on nationalism. Like you have to, wherever you will go, you'll always be a Rwandese. I mean, there is a lot we can remember. But what we are trying to say is that the loss of Kizito is not on Rwanda, it's on Africa in general. Each time we get somebody losing, that is Africa losing the son or daughter because of dictators. I mean, can't we do much better? Who kills such a resourceful person, really, for any country? And honestly, this is a person who was not on any notion of saying that he's a political dissident. He promoted peace, he promoted love. He was a person that could do much better. But we have very many Kizitos, and that's why we are calling for this conference. For how long is it going to be? How many do we need to see or to bury for us to know that there is a problem for the country? I will thank you for being here today. Again, the panelists, I can't thank you enough. Anytime we call, we always see your support. We shall do more. And I will thank you. Yeah, I can just give a chance to the MC to continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nkurikirana ikiganiro umusanzu w'umuhanzi kuri televiziyo nyarwanda.
Volume.
Mutegurirwa na Fondation KMP. Uyu munsi rero tugiye kubagezaho urugendo Fondation KMP yagiye mu ntara y'Amajyaruguru mu karere ka Gicumbi ku itariki 8 Ugushyingo muri Hotel Urumuri ifatanyije na World Vision. Aho rero muri Hotel Urumuri Fondation KMP ifatanyije na World Vision yahurije hamwe abanyeshuri barenga 2,000 bavuye mu bigo by'amashuri 5 byo muri ako karere. World Vision na KMP ni imiryango ikomoka mu kwemera kwa Gikristo, ariko ikora ibikorwa bigenerwa abantu b'ingeri zose. Iki gikorwa ya KMP yakoreye mu karere ka Gicumbi iri muri gahunda yise inkunga y'ubuhanzi uburezi n'uburere mboneragihugu. Iyi gahunda igizwe n'ibitaramo KMP bikorera ibigo by'amashuri yisumbuye byose byo mu Rwanda. Imbabazi, amahoro, ubumwe n'ubwiyunge ni bimwe mu butumwa KMP itanga muri ibyo bitaramo. Reka mbareke mukurikire igitaramo KMP yakoreye mu karere ka Gicumbi.
Nyakubahwa abahagarariye meya mu karere n'umusimeya ushinzwe imibereho myiza y'abaturage, ba nyakubahwa mwaturutse ubuyobozi bwa World Vision ndetse n'abakozi ba World Vision hano mu Gicumbi, ba nyakubahwa abanyeshuri baha. Ubuhanzi usibye no kudagadura gusobanurira abantu n'imvugo nziza ishobora gukoreshwa ikubaka imyumvire y'abantu, ikabaha ibitekerezo bishya, ikubaka n'ubumuntu bwabo. Igice cy'ubumuntu, igice navuga ayambaza ndangagaciro z'ubumuntu, zo gukundana, zo kubaka kivandimwe, zo kwiyunga, zo kubabarira n'ibindi. Urumva rero twebwe fondasiyo yacu muri rusange intego yacu ni gukoresha ubuhanzi dutanga ubutumwa bwubahiriza indangagaciro bya buri muntu zashimishwa na jenoside ndetse n'ibindi byago igihugu cyacu cyahuye nabyo. Ubumwe rero cyangwa ubwiyunge butandukanye na cohabitation pacifique. Donc cohabitation pacifique ni ikintu twakwita ubworoherane, harimo na tolerance, uvuga ngo uriya nubwo atameze kimwe nanjye kandi nubwo ntanamukunda ariko ntacyo nzamutwara, buri wese akorohera undi. Iyo rero ntabwo ariyo reconciliation, nta nubwo ari ubwo bumwe, ntabwo ari ubwo bwiyunge. Tuvuga ubwiyunge iyo abantu n'ubundi bahoze ari umwe, noneho bagatandukana, noneho kwiyunga n'ubundi ni uguhuza ibintu byari bisanzweho, n'est-ce pas? Ni ukuvuga ngo amahoro tuvuga agomba guhera mu mitima yacu, kandi iyo umuntu ababariye mbere y'uko bigirira neza uwababariye bibanza kumugirira neza ubwe, bibanza kumuha amahoro. Nkunda rero kuvuga ngo amahoro y'umutima niwo mutima w'amahoro. Sinzi niba mwumva icyo nshaka kuvuga. Amahoro y'umutima w'umuntu niwo mutima w'amahoro muri sosiyete. Amahoro banyegeranya n'umubirikira. Murabona umubirikira bakoresha aho navukiye bajyaga bakoresha cyane cyane basuka peteroli. Umubirikira hasi utangira ari mugufi ukagenda waguka. Amahoro nayo ahera mu mutima w'umuntu, mu mutima wa individu, umuntu umwe. Noneho uwo muntu kubera ko afite amahoro akabana n'abandi mu mahoro nyine. Amahoro si umutekano, biratandukanye, ubwo byuzuzanya nyine. Umutekano nawugereranya n'umutemeri. Umutemeri wo uhera hasi ari munini ukagenda wowe uba muto. Ni ukuvuga ngo umutekano ni ukubanza gutunganya ibibazo byose ku buryo muri sosiyete nta sasu rivuga, nta muntu, nta bintu bihungabanya umutekano, noneho individi ikaba yagira amahoro. Si byose umutekano n'inzego zishinzwe umutekano zacu zifasha ko muri karitsiye aho dutuye mu gihugu cyacu nta midugararo, nta ntugunda zibaho, sibyo? Noneho umuntu yaba afite umutekano, abantu bose bafite umutekano, umuntu mu rugo iwe no ku giti cye nawe akaba yagira amahoro. Urumva rero ni demarishe ebyiri zijya muri sanse zitandukanye ariko zuzuzanye.
Amerika n'Uburayi ibihugu byose, Aziya na Oceania, isi yose ibintu by'ubukire, ariko ntitwibagirwe ko turi abana mu Rwanda. Amerika n'Uburayi, Aziya na Oceania, ibintu by'ubukire, ariko ntitwibagirwe ko turi abana mu Rwanda. Isi yose Amerika, Aziya na Oceania, ibihugu bya Afurika biraducumbikira, ariko ntitwibagirwe turika biraducumbikira
sinzi niba hari utari kubibona everything birahari ariko ubuzima bwaba bwiza bwagira bya bintu Suzanne yabwiraga harya ngo birashoboka bishoboka bite se bishoboka bite gute ni gute nshobora kugendana higana nkakorana n'umuntu wangiza ati akangira imfubyi akambuza amahirwe y'ubuzima akambuza gutetera ku bibero bya mama nk'abandi bana ntabwo bishoboka kereka hariyo ntayibera kereka iyo biba ntihari kereka hari ivutse bundi bwa kabiri nibwo ibyo ngibyo byashoboka